Hello and welcome to the TruGolf Academy. You've joined me, Jon Watts, today in my swing studio. Today's video is going to be about 3 common setup mistakes I see with the driver. So this is following on from a previous video I did all to do with the irons. And it just seemed a really good idea to follow on from that into the driver, because there are a couple of changes I guess I see and quite common faults I see with amateur golfers when they get the big stick in their hands. And watching this video, changing these couple of little things at setup is really going to help you hit this golf club better off the tee. So point number 1, or fault number 1 that I tend to see, is players, because it's a longer golf club, stretching a lot further from the golf club. So what I like to see with an iron, first of all, is a good tilt forwards from the hips, just a softening of the knees, not over flexing them, and allowing those arms to hang straight down from your shoulders. So they're just in a natural hanging position right underneath your shoulder. Now, I don't mind your hands being just a fraction further away when we're talking about a driver, but what I see with a lot of golfers is they start really stretching away from it. When they get their arms stretching away from it, it tends to give them a very high handle position. And I talked about this as one of my faults with irons, but when players get a very high handle position, we tend to see a very palmy grip. So we'll see the club much higher up in the palm of your hand here, whereas we really want it down in the fingers. When players get a very high palmy grip, it's okay if you're putting, it's okay if you're chipping, it's good for control, it's rubbish for power. It really limits your wrist action in the backswing and in the downswing. So the fault number 1, the common mistake I see with the driver, is players standing way too far away from the golf club. This gap really increases, their arms stretch out away from them, and you'll see that also causes a very high palmy grip, which is very, very destructive. Now, I'm not suggesting you can't hit a golf ball when you're stretching away from it, but what you've got to do is throw your arms further out away from your body, and that makes it very hard to do because the arms aren't really connected to what the body is doing. So what I would suggest, if this is a fault of yours, get it on video, see yourself in a mirror or patio window. You'll have a pretty good idea if you compare it to the elite golfers, if it looks pretty close or not. What I tend to do, and you may have seen this from other videos, it's just a habit of mine, is I make sure that the middle of the club is behind the middle of the golf ball, and I check for about a stretched handspan gap from the end of the club to your body. It's important to make sure the club is in its correct playing angle and you haven't changed this angle first, so it's pretty flat to the floor. Stretched forefinger gap, end of the club to your body. If we're doing anything with the driver, I don't mind a fraction further, because forefinger gap with an iron, I don't mind a little bit more than that with a driver, but we'd know if we start getting too far away and really stretching those arms out. So the forefinger gap still works well for me. Tilt forwards from my hips, and then you can see my arms are not quite hanging underneath my shoulders like they would do for an iron. They're slightly further away, but that's very different to something like this that I see all too often. So it's getting that setup position correct that's going to help us make sure we hit the middle of the golf club more consistently. Fault number 2 that I see with a driver, and this is really happening with the driver or the long clubs, so possibly the fairway woods as well. We know that the ball should be played more forwards in our stance, or hopefully you know that. So we'd play more the 7-iron down to the sand wedge or the lob wedge quite central. As the club gets longer, we'd move that ball a little bit more forward. So I would suggest, like most coaches, that we're playing the ball level with or just inside our lead heel. So it's much further forwards in my stance. Now, when the ball goes more forwards, what I see far too often is players' shoulders tending to point, for right-handed golfers, more to the left in a more open position. And it comes about because if I start with that club in the middle, and we said I had nice square shoulders in that position, if I then move the club more forwards towards where the golf ball is, if I move that off the tee just for a second, then my shoulders have almost followed. So they've gone from a square position here to a very open position here, where they're starting to point more to the left. And that's what I see a lot of. I see okay club alignment, pretty good, feet, knees, hips, but then the shoulders tend to point open. So for a right-handed golfer, off to the left, for a left-handed golfer, off to the right. And that will encourage an out to in swing. The other fault it tends to do, and this is leading on to my next step, is it tends to really level the shoulders. So when we get that ball more forwards and the shoulders more left, it tends to get my shoulders quite level, because my third point is actually I want to see more of a tilt here. I get too many amateur golfers with a driver trying to set up like an iron, where they're getting their weight quite equal and their shoulders a little bit more level. We really want to encourage with the driver an upward blow. So we want to make sure that we are tilted behind the golf ball, and that's going to encourage an upward angle of attack that's really going to optimize our distance. So fault number one at setup that I see with the driver is players getting too far away because it's a longer golf club and stretching. That gets a very high handle position, generally gets a very palmy grip. It also puts a lot of pressure on my back there. I feel like I have to stoop as I do it. So my suggestion would be checking. Having a checkpoint, I tend to use sort of a hand span gap end of the club to my body before I open my feet apart. Fault number two I tend to see is because the ball is more forwards, the shoulders tend to be pointing more open, more to the left for a right-handed golfer, which is really going to encourage some out-to-in fades and slices that we see far too often with amateur golfers. And fault number three I see is players setting up almost too even with their weight, trying to get almost their head or their nose more over the golf ball. With a driver, I really want you to try and tilt behind the golf ball, meaning that your head, your sternum, your nose is behind the golf ball to encourage this upward angle of attack. I'm going to nip out of view just for a second to click on the keyboard. So you guys will see this ball flight, but I'll just see if I can incorporate those changes into my setup position. So hand span gap, end of the club to my body. So I know I'm the right distance away. If you do struggle with these open shoulders, what you could easily do is just feel like you tuck your trail elbow in a little bit. I see far too often golfers starting with a very straight, locked trail arm, which you can see automatically gives me those open shoulders to the left. So you could easily just try and feel like you tuck in your trail elbow or pull back your trail shoulder. And the last thing I'm going to do is try and tilt a little bit further behind the golf ball to encourage this upward angle of attack. Let's give it a whirl from there. Well, it was pretty straight to me. So it's landed out there on the 250 line, rolled out to 273. For the first swing of the day, not too displeased with that one. I hit up on the golf ball there by 3 degrees. So by me tilting a little bit behind it, that's really helped. And the swing path was very minimal as well. I'll just bring it up on the screen. My swing path was 0.1 out to in, and I hit up on the ball by 3 degrees. So I created a very minimal swing path with a very good angle of attack where I'm actually striking upwards on the golf ball, which means I know that I've got this angle correct at setup. I know if you can incorporate those few setup changes to your driver, you're definitely going to be hitting this golf club better. If you did enjoy the content of that video, give us a thumbs up. Do subscribe to the channel as well. There's all the other content every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 5:30. It's a great way to stay in touch with the channel. Please comment below or any other social media platforms with videos you'd like to see, anything you're struggling with or perhaps some of your swings so I can start analysing those. Thanks guys, we'll see you soon.